Evan and Claire came over on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of day I used to spend sanding old wood in the garage. They brought a tablet instead of a pie, a list of figures instead of conversation. At first I thought they were just excited. Weddings make people silly sometimes, too many dreams, not enough grounding. But the air shifted fast. Claire was tapping on the screen, explaining deposits and venue options like she was talking to a client, not family. Evan leaned against the counter, grinning. "Mom, you'll love this," he said, showing me a ballroom overlooking the coast. "Just $200,000 for the whole package. And it's perfect. You'll just need to cover it up front so the vendors can book." I blinked, thinking I'd misheard. $200,000, he shrugged. "You've got savings. And this is important." He scrolled again, voice light and careless. "Besides, your life's been small. Let us handle the big things. You just pay for it." Claire laughed quietly, a sound with no warmth. "We don't want her stressing about choices. She can just enjoy it from the sidelines." I felt my palms flatten against the table. "Enjoy what exactly?" the satisfaction Evan said, his tone shifting lighter, crueler. "You'll have helped us build something worth remembering." When he looked at me again, the smile was gone. "Your life means nothing to brag about, Mom. You'd just embarrass us in front of everyone." The words hung there, heavy and hollow. The faucet dripped, once then again. I stared at my hands, the same hands that built the cabinets, the porch, the crib he once slept in. I didn't answer him. I didn't need to. I stood by the window and listened as they discussed lighting and floral arches, their voices fading into noise. By the time they left, the kitchen was still warm from their perfume and laughter, but something inside me had cooled completely. I turned off the light, washed the 2 coffee cups, and set them upside down to dry, already thinking about the binder Claire had left on the counter. The binder was still there when I came down the next morning. White leather, gold lettering, the kind of thing you'd expect from a real estate agent or a lawyer. I made coffee, sat across from it, and stared for a long while before opening it. Every page shone with glossy perfection, tables under chandeliers, flower arrangements, tall enough to hide behind dresses that cost more than my first truck. I was halfway through a section marked Preferred Vendors when I heard the door open. Evan and Claire stepped in like they owned the place. "You found it," Claire said, sounding pleased. She sat across from me, perfume filling the air. "It's all organized by category: venue, florals, entertainment. We're finalizing deposits this week." Evan slid into the chair beside her, tapping the table with a pen. "We've done most of the work already," he said. "Just need you to sign off on the payments. This is tradition. Parents contribute. Tradition," I repeated, keeping my voice steady. "And what does contribution mean this time?" Claire's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We'll send invoices directly to you. It's simpler that way." I closed the binder gently. "Do I get an invitation? At least for a heartbeat?" No one spoke. Then Claire laughed under her breath. "We're still working out seating. Don't make it awkward." Her tone was polite on the surface, but it sliced clean through. Evan didn't even look up from his phone. I remembered when he used to beg me to sit front row at his school recitals. Now, apparently, I was the embarrassment in the back. So I asked because someone had to. "How much are you expecting from me?" Claire didn't hesitate. "All of it." She said it like it was obvious, like breathing. I nodded slowly, pretending to think. Inside, something shifted, a quiet, precise break. I looked down at the binder again, its weight heavy against the wood. When they left, I didn't put it away. I just opened to the last page and circled a line in red ink: property and housing options after the wedding. Later that week, Evan came by again, alone this time. He said Claire was at a tasting, but he needed to go over a few practical details. I made coffee while he pulled out his phone, scrolling through pictures of houses like a realtor on commission. "Look at these," he said, turning the screen toward me. "Brand new builds closer to the city. Once we sell this place, we can put down a strong deposit." Claire's parents said they'd match whatever we get. I froze mid-stir. Sell this place? He didn't even notice my tone. Yeah, it's too old for you anyway. The market's high, you could get a great return. Claire's dad says you'd be better off in something smaller. I kept my hands on the counter so he wouldn't see them tremble. This house wasn't too old. It was the only home I ever built. Every inch of it had passed through my hands, each beam, each hinge. My husband, Mark, and I had poured years into it, brick by brick, board by board. He used to joke that the foundation was stronger than most marriages. Evan leaned back in the chair, tapping his pen against a notepad. You'll be comfortable, Mom. We'll take care of the paperwork. Once the sale closes, we'll have the funds ready for our new place. He looked so sure, like he was describing the weather. I wanted to tell him what those walls had seen. The nights I worked, double shifts. The mornings Mark mixed concrete with laughter in his voice. But I stayed quiet. Words couldn't compete with the numbers flashing in his mind. When he left, the house felt louder than usual. The floor creaked under my steps like it remembered who it belonged to. I sat on the back porch listening to the wind move through the rafters we once measured together. Mark had said it the day we built them strong beams outlast storms. I wrapped my cardigan tighter and looked at the dark sky, wondering what kind of storm was already on its way. It started with a number that didn't look right. I had gone online to check a small payment. Nothing unusual, just the utility bill. But the balance was lower than it should have been. I scrolled through the statement twice before my eyes landed on the first red flag, Vinview Resort Deposit. A few $1,000s. I didn't remember booking any resort. At first, I thought maybe Evan had used my account by mistake. Then I saw the memo line, secured C&E wedding. The handwriting was familiar. Slanted rushed his. I kept scrolling. Designer boutiques, airline deposits, a transfer to a travel agency. All marked authorized. My own card had been funding their celebration. I sat there in silence, the cursor blinking like a pulse on the screen. That card had been meant for emergencies, flat tires, sudden repairs, the kind of things you can't plan for, but trust family to handle with care. He'd used it like an open wallet, and I hadn't even noticed. My first instinct was to call him, demand an explanation, but I stopped myself. Anger is easy. Understanding the scope, that's harder. I printed every page, watching the paper slide out of the printer one after another, each one a record of quiet theft. When I finished, I stacked them neatly and wrote on the folders tab in black ink blueprints. That's what this was, a plan, drawn without my consent. But every plan has weak points if you know where to look. I'd spent decades learning how to read patterns, how to see stress before the structure fails. I ran my hand over the folder and felt something steady return to me, the same calm that always came before a big repair. No shouting, no scene. Just the work that needed doing. I placed the folder in the drawer beside the old invoices from the house renovation. The documents looked right at home among the plans that had once built my life. And as I shut the drawer, I already knew I wouldn't be calling Evan tonight. The folder sat on my desk all night. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't stop looking at the lines of ink and numbers that told the story of how far my son had drifted. By morning, I'd gone past anger. What I needed now was proof that what I felt wasn't some misunderstanding between generations. So that evening I called him. His voice came through bright, distracted, as if he were already somewhere else. Hey, Mom, can this wait? We're meeting with the photographer. It won't take long, I said. I was cleaning the closet and found something you might want to tell Claire about. What's that? My old wedding dress, I said. The one I sewed myself. Maybe she could wear it. It's simple, but it was made with love. There was a pause, then laughter. Not surprised, laughter, dismissive cutting. Mom, that thing belongs in a thrift bin, he said. Claire's getting hers from Milan. Don't take this the wrong way, but no one wants to wear homemade stuff at a Crestwood wedding. I could hear voices in the background, more laughter, a door shutting. My throat went dry. I managed a small breath before answering. I see. Well, I'll put it away then. He didn't hear the shift in my tone. Good idea. Oh, and don't worry about any more details. We've got it covered. I almost said something, but the words stopped short. There was no reaching him now, no bridge left to cross. I ended the call quietly and sat back, the phone still in my hand. The house around me felt heavier, but not hopeless. Just settled. Final. The kind of silence that comes right before you start measuring new wood for the next frame. If he truly thought my life meant nothing, then I'd show him what nothing could build. I set my alarm for 5 a.m. and laid out the folder marked Blueprints. The plan would begin before dawn. It took a week before he came back. I heard the knock before I saw the flowers through the glass, bright, expensive, lifeless. Evan stood on the porch with a look I recognized immediately, the careful face of someone who'd practiced their lines in the car mirror. Hey, Mom, he said, holding out the bouquet. I've been thinking about how I talked to you. I shouldn't have said some of those things. It was stress. You know how planning can get. He waited for me to make it easy. I didn't. I just opened the door wider and stepped aside. Come in, I said. Coffee. He smiled, relieved, as if the hardest part was over. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where he'd told me my life meant nothing, and I poured 2 cups. He didn't drink his right away. Instead, he started talking about responsibility and family unity, words that sounded borrowed from someone else. I just think he said carefully, "We got off track. We can fix this. If you could just reactivate the joint account, the vendors won't panic. It's temporary. I'll handle everything this time." I stirred my coffee and studied him the way I used to study wood grain for cracks, slowly, patiently, until the truth showed itself. His eyes didn't meet mine for long. He glanced at his phone twice while pretending not to. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "Maybe tomorrow." He relaxed, mistaking patience for surrender. "Thanks, Mom. I knew you'd understand." After he left, I stood by the window and watched his car disappear down the street. The flowers sat on the counter, too polished to be sincere. I dropped them in the trash pedals, scattering across the floor like shavings from a bad cut. Then I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. The folder marked Blueprints was already open on the table. By the time the sun began to fade through the kitchen window, every account tied to Evan's name was frozen, and the next call on my list was waiting. By mid-morning, I was sitting across from my lawyer, a man named Harris, who'd handled our property papers years ago when Mark was still alive. He looked at the folder I slid across his desk, the one labeled Blueprints, and didn't ask many questions. Maybe it was the steadiness in my voice. Maybe he'd seen enough families crumble over money to recognize the look of someone done being used. I want to transfer everything I said, not to my son, to a foundation. Scholarships for trade students, builders, carpenters, engineers, the ones who still believe in working with their hands. He nodded slowly. "We can set that up. What will you call it?" I thought for a moment, then said, "The Ellison Trades Fund." It felt right solid, like something that would last longer than any wedding. The paperwork took hours. I initialed, signed, and dated, watching each line draw a quiet boundary between what was mine and what was no longer his to touch. The funds that had once been promised for imported champagne would now buy toolkits and tuition. For the first time in months, the math made sense. When I got home, I made a list of every vendor printed in Claire's glossy binder. One by one, I began calling. The florist, the caterer, the venue by the coast. Each conversation started the same way, my tone calm, deliberate. "This is Mara Ellison. Funding for the Ellison Vale wedding has been withdrawn." There was always a pause, confused, polite, or nervous, but I didn't linger. I gave them my lawyer's number for questions and hung up. By late afternoon, the calls were done. What they'd built so confidently over my savings was now hollow, the structure already leaning. They just didn't know it yet. I put the phone down, wiped the counter clean, and looked at the folded documents in my bag. The foundation was real. The rest soon would not be. The house was quiet, except for the ticking of the clock, counting down to the day everything they planned would finally give way. The morning of their wedding came warm and still, the kind of quiet that feels deliberate. I brewed a single cup of coffee and sat on the porch, the phone buzzing steadily beside me. Unknown numbers, messages, voicemails, stacking one after another. I didn't need to answer to know what they said. Somewhere along the coast, the first cracks were already showing. The florist would have arrived to find the order unpaid. The caterer would have checked his balance sheet, realized the final installment never cleared. And the Crestwood manager, proud and polite, would have met the Vales at the gate, only to explain that without confirmation of funds, the property was closed for private maintenance. I could picture the sequence perfectly. Claire's mother demanding answers, the photographer insisting on cash before lifting his camera, the guests stranded in their formal clothes as whispers spread through the garden. The story would travel faster than the vows ever could. My phone vibrated again, Evan's name this time. I watched the screen flash, then fade. I took another sip of coffee. The bitterness felt honest. Inside on the kitchen counter, the wedding binder still sat open where they'd left it weeks ago. The edges of the pages had curled from too much handling, too many hands that never built a thing. I flipped through it once more. Menus, budgets, smiling notes written in Claire's handwriting, and closed it softly. The trash bin opened with a hollow sound. The binder slid in easily, landing on top of the discarded bouquet he'd brought during his apology. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and set the mug in the sink. Outside, a breeze passed through the porch, railing light and steady. For the first time in a long while, the air felt clear. The phone buzzed one last time, then stopped. The house was quiet again, just as I liked it. I gathered the folder of signed documents from my desk drawer and placed it in my bag, knowing sooner or later he'd come to my door. It was close to sunset when I heard tires shriek against the gravel drive. The car came to a stop so abruptly that the front bumper nearly brushed the mailbox. I didn't move. I was in the living room, sealing a box marked "Tools Keep," with a strip of tape that caught the light like a silver line down the middle of everything that mattered. The front door burst open before I could reach it. Evan stood there, still half in his tuxedo, the collar open and one cufflink missing. His face was flushed, eyes rimmed red. "You ruined my wedding," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Do you have any idea what people will think?" I pressed the tape down with my palm and looked at him evenly. "They'll think the truth," I said. He blinked, confused, angry. "You embarrassed me. Claire's family, everyone knows it was you. Do you realize what you've done?" I gestured toward the front window. The for sale sign swayed lightly in the evening wind. "This house was built for love, not greed," I said quietly. "And I won't let you sell it for show." He followed my gaze, the color draining from his face. "You're selling it. You can't." "I already did," I said. "The papers are signed." For a moment, he just stood there, hands opening and closing at his sides, a man trying to grab onto something that was no longer there. The silence between us was heavy, full of all the things we'd stopped saying long before this day. Finally, he looked around the room, at the boxes stacked neatly against the wall, at the bare shelves, at the home he'd once planned to cash in for his own future, and he saw it for what it was never his to begin with. He didn't speak again. He turned, walked out to the car, and slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I watched the taillights fade down the road, then turned back to the half-packed room. Tomorrow, I'd be gone too, taking only what was worth keeping. The house sold faster than I expected. The morning I handed over the keys, I stood on the porch for a long moment, letting my hand rest on the frame one last time. The wood was worn smooth by years of living, of laughter, of silence. Then I walked away without looking back. My new place is smaller, quieter. A single-story cottage a few blocks from the vocational school. I can hear the sound of saws from my porch in the afternoons, the same rhythm I once knew by heart. The first week after moving in, I slept like I hadn't in years. No phone calls, no demands. Just the kind of peace that feels earned. One afternoon, I stopped by the workshop that now bears a small plaque. The Ellison Trades Fund Building Futures by Hand. Inside, a group of students were bent over their first project, a simple cedar bench. The scent of fresh wood filled the air, grounding and honest. I stood near one of the tables, watching a boy sand the curve of the seat. He was nervous, careful, measuring twice before every cut. When he stepped away, I ran my hand along the edge. The surface was rough but steady, unfinished but full of promise. For the first time in a long while, I felt something firm under my chest again, not burden, but worth. What I'd built wasn't grand or glittering, but it would last. The money once meant for one day of luxury would now stretch across decades of purpose. I never heard from Evan again after that night. No letters, no apologies, no explanations. The silence didn't sting, it simply confirmed what I already knew. Some ties break clean and stay that way. As I locked the door of the workshop and stepped out into the fading light, I thought about all the years I'd spent building for others. Now finally, every beam, every choice was my own, and that was enough.